Hi, friends. Welcome back, or just welcome, to this current events series by Sacred Calls. I'm Bethany Benz Whittington, a PCUSA pastor and teacher, and I am bringing you this series simply because it brings me joy. So it's funny then that this week we are talking about compassion fatigue because that is not bringing me joy. There is a lot for all of us to be holding right now, and it is exhausting. So that is what we're going to talk about. Before we start, pause the video and read together Isaiah 40, verses 27 through 31. Then come back and we'll get started. Okay, let's go. So after this video is over, I'm going to ask that each of you in your discussion group name aloud and pray for the many, many things that are causing you to be weary. I'm going to name a few of my own right now. Mass casualties in Palestine, the deaths of innocents in Israel and Palestine, war in so many places, including Ukraine and Congo and Sudan and Colombia and Ghana and Myanmar, and the list goes on. The state of healthcare and all of its ramifications, pregnant people, the state of public school funding and fighting over books, and in my own very, very small circle right here, our own Montessori school that we send our children to, which is crumbling all around us. And that is just my little list for today. On different days, it will be longer. It is almost never shorter. And I know about compassion fatigue from being a pastor and an activist, but it really came into stark relief for a lot of us during the pandemic. I had several people in my extended circles who died from COVID, as I'm sure you did. And the other thing that happened in 2020 was the uprising of the movement for Black Lives. It was what came to be known as the twin pandemics of COVID and racism. I attended rallies and protests, and I always was aware of my surroundings, my child, my mask. I wore my Black Lives Matter mask into Walmart in East Tennessee, but mostly I stayed inside with a baby, alone, and watching as the world around me changed drastically from day to day. And then, of course, January 6th happened. And again, in East Tennessee, where our neighbors are 3%ers, I asked my husband if we needed to have our kiddo sleep with us that night, away from windows and the front of the house. And then, of course, the war in Ukraine and multiple school shootings, including in Uvalde, where one of my pastor colleagues serves, more elections, and now the continuation of 75 years of horror in Israel and Palestine. It's felt like there's not been a break from the outrage, the pain, the sorrow. I'm not even an empath, and I am exhausted. And here's the problem with compassion fatigue: it leads to hopelessness, and hopelessness leads to apathy, and apathy leads to the powerful becoming more powerful, and eventually we have the Hunger Games. No one wants that. So you have to rest. You have to take time off. I keep opening up social media and seeing people I respect saying things like, stay outraged. Yes, stay outraged. Absolutely. Call your representatives, go to protests and rallies and sign petitions and post on your own social media, and also get some rest. There's a great book called Rest is Resistance by Tricia Hersey that goes deep into this idea of rest and why we need it and how to get it, and using it as a tool of resistance to, among other things, racism and capitalism. In it, she says, if our struggles preclude or exclude rest, if they are cultivating fear, anxiety, or a dwindling sense of hope, then we need to find a different way. This hope is really the linchpin of the whole discussion. If we're all out of hope, then why are we doing anything, really? And that is the immense danger of compassion fatigue. We must rest. Even Jesus rested. Actually, he rested a lot. And he invited the disciples to rest. He chastised them for having so little faith, probably because they hadn't slept in a few days. Rest keeps us from losing faith. It keeps us from losing our outrage, and it keeps us from losing hope. And only when we have hope can we keep moving forward towards God's kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. So, as the scriptures say, from whence cometh your help? Where does your hope come from? I asked you to read this excerpt from Isaiah 40 for several reasons. Partly because it's probably familiar, and that's always nice. Partly because Rest is Resistance recommended it to me. And partly because it really nicely sums up this moment and tells us there is still hope. Chapter 40 of Isaiah assumes that the Hebrew people have now been exiled by the Babylonians and are living in the diaspora, away from their homes. They've been forcibly removed, banned from returning under threat of death. And the people are devastated. They are hopeless. And then Isaiah, the prophet, swoops in and says, not to worry, y'all, it's gonna be fine. Have faith in God. You cannot maintain your existence or resistance on your own, but God is with you. So take it easy, put your faith in God, all will be well. It's a lovely sentiment coming from the prophet Isaiah, right? Put your faith in God and all will be well. How very easy, right? But I don't think Isaiah intends for it to sound like an easier said than done situation. Putting our faith in God, even in the midst of the worst, is actually really hard to do. And Isaiah is telling them to do just that because God will give you rest and God will fight alongside you for peace and justice. In fact, God will carry you through that fight. But like I said, it's near impossible to have faith when everything is awful. But I will tell you what, friends, most of us white Western American Christians were actually pretty okay comparatively. There's an old story that I think comes from Tom Long, who is a professor at Candler School of Theology. It was about a man whose wife died suddenly on the day before Easter. The man got up and went to church on Easter, but couldn't muster up any faith in the resurrected Christ. And his community, his church community, his friends, his family there, they said, that's okay. We will have faith for you until you find yours again. This is who God is calling us to be right now. Have a nap and then go fight like hell with God at your side for all the people who just don't have anything left to give. Let them rest. Then you rest, then I'll rest. It's how we get things done in beloved community. Speaking of rest, I thought very seriously about talking about the ouster of George Santos from Congress this week, hoping for a bit of levity and maybe a little bit of Schadenfreude, because I also need some rest. So maybe next week. But for now, compassion fatigue is real. Rest is resistance. Have faith for one another and fight like hell. Peace, friends.